It's been 1 week since Ukraine's incursion into Russia, with Ukraine's top military commander saying his forces now control about 1,000 square kilometers of Russian territory. For more on this, we're joined now by James Nixie, head of the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House in London, England. James, thanks for speaking with us today. We appreciate this.
Pleasure.
Now, this isn't the first incursion on Russian territory during this war, but it has proven to be the most substantial. In fact, it's the largest attack on Russia since World War II. How is this destabilizing Russia's operation, and why now?
Yeah, that's a remarkable statistic you just mentioned, and it destabilizes it by the very fact of it happening. What I mean is that in doing so, this is a huge embarrassment to Vladimir Putin, to the Russian government more broadly, to the military. And what we see is a situation where currently this has been happening for almost a week now, and still the Russians have not managed to evict the Ukrainians from their territory. So we just see an entirely new element into the game, which we haven't really seen on this scale. Yes, you're right. You hinted at we've seen some Russian groups attacking Russians in Russia, but such a large contingent of Ukrainians inside Russia holding territory. It shows the Ukrainians' ability to be innovative in this war, which makes it more symmetrical, bearing in mind the Russians' huge numerical and kit advantages.
And there's clearly a strategy behind this. We'll get into that shortly. But first, what are the implications for Ukraine's allies like Canada? How does this incursion impact Ukraine's support system?
I think that's a key question. It is absolutely vital that Ukraine's allies see that Ukraine is not down and out, that it is winning, that it can make inroads into Russia in every sense. And nothing breeds success like success. If Ukraine were not to be seen to be succeeding, then quite clearly it would be throwing good money after bad. But if you can see that Ukraine is at least in some respects winning, then clearly this is a cause worth fighting for, if you believe in the West that this is a question of the global and certainly European security, but actually global security is at stake here. So really, we are funding something that is very worthwhile, A, in and of itself, and B, if it's actually working.
Interesting. And how has this advancement by Ukraine changed the dynamics of this war, particularly in Russia, where we know propaganda and misinformation have been deployed on the population?
Yeah, I don't think we should get ahead of ourselves. People often talk about game changers, not least, for example, with the recent input of F-16s into the theater of war. However, this is a significantly new development, and it is certainly something which has put the Russians onto the back foot. It will demoralize the adversary, but I don't think we're yet at the stage where we can see that Russia is in any way folding or heading to the negotiating table, giving up, going home. Actually, to be perfectly honest with you, this will obviously make the Russian leadership angrier, and they may put more into it in order to evict the Russians from their territory. Of course, there is an irony here, a supreme irony, whereby to evict the Ukrainians back over the border into Ukrainian territory would be a de facto admission that there is a border, that Ukraine is a sovereign country, which is what the Russians have been denying all along.
Yeah, and you were saying it's going to make Putin angrier. He says Ukraine's incursion is Kyiv's attempt to gain leverage in any future peace talks. What do you make of that? Is that sound strategy?
I think we're in danger of getting ahead of ourselves somewhat. Yes, the Russians have offered peace talks, but only on condition of Crimea not being an issue. That Donbass is Russia's. Actually, other areas that the Russians do not currently hold in Ukraine are Russia's, and neutrality. So it's not for the Ukrainians or even for the West a serious offer of peace talks. And it has to be said, from the other side, Ukraine's offer of peace talks would be based upon the Russians fulfilling Volodymyr Zelensky's 10-point plan, none of which points are acceptable to Russia. So we are seeing a situation whereby both sides, frankly, are as far apart as ever before. It's just that the Ukrainians have pushed that bit further in an unexpected direction. But we're not. This doesn't bring us any closer to the end.
Well, Ukraine has said that this strategy is being kept in secrecy. What do you think it might be? What do you think the goal might be here?
Personally, I doubt that their goal is to hold on to Russian territory. In fact, they've already said that that's not the long-term goal. It would also be somewhat suicidal because eventually one would expect that the Russians will bring enough force to do so. And the Ukrainians can't afford to lose people. And of course, it's not willing to put people into the so-called meat grinder of war that Russia is. For Russia, its souls, its soldiers are dispensable. For Ukraine, that's a much more finite commodity. So I think the Ukrainian strategy, as you ask, is really one of PR, of optics, to show that it's still in this fight, and more than that, that it can genuinely impress upon Russia that they are an adversary to be reckoned with, and that Ukraine is no more bowing out of this fight than Russia is.
Okay, and as you said, not necessarily a game changer. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Thank you so much for your insight today, James. That's James Nixie from the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House, joining us from London, England.